Chapter 1. Horrifying roars exploded in the throne room like thunder and shattered all of the windows that surrounded me. A meteoric crash made the ground tremble, and chilling screams of distress were quick to follow, bouncing off of the gleaming marble floors. The sounds came all the way from the courtyard outside, and my high council answered them with cries of their own as they scattered to avoid the splintering glass. The jewel's emergency alarm hammered at my ears, and for a nanosecond, I was frozen in fear. No time for fear, I thought. I'm a god king now. I swallowed a scream, stood up from the seat of flame, and took the first crown off of my head. Emberian curses leapt from my mouth as I hurried toward the exit. 2 Godwatcher guards flung open the hall's tremendous golden doors so that I could run through them. I handed my crown to one of them as the jarring scene unraveled before my eyes. Xeraxia's sun put a hellish glow on his black skin, and smoke was spilling from his nostrils. Smells of burnt death spun like angry demons through the air as I made my way toward him. I could see the smeared gore of some poor animal dripping from his silver teeth when he bared them at the commotion. He snapped his jaws at the screams of the scrambling palace dwellers until the glint of my metallic royal robe caught his attention. The atmosphere shook when he swung his head toward me. Horns and blue eyes glared from either side of his sinister face. He was coughing up small globes of flame, and his claws and legs easily tore through the stone beneath him. Inconceivable terror spread like a virus throughout the castle, and I started to understand why some people called him Lord of the Grave. His wings had nearly flattened House Equilhearth's only office building in the Jewel. They were going to be pissed. This, however, would not compare to the anger of the Jewel Keepers who helped maintain the capital's stronghold and its many spells. I watched them panic at the sight of the main lava fountain, which had been decimated by his gigantic tail. "Javelin, goddammit!" I hollered in English. "You've never landed inside the walls before. You know you're not supposed to do this. Look at this mess." By that time, I was only a few steps away from him. If things had been different, maybe I would have laughed at him for trying and failing to squeeze himself into this area of the Jewel. He was so impossibly huge that he could swallow young elephants whole if he wanted to. He'd been growing fast, and it made me wonder how much bigger he was going to get. He was only 3 years old, not counting his previous incarnations. No more of that, Javelin," I yelled when he opened his cavernous mouth to scream at me. "I'm here now." I had to admit to myself that I'd been neglecting him. The Kingdom of Coldwind attacked my palace a little more than 2 months ago, so I'd been busy increasing security and rebuilding. Through my magic, I could sometimes feel Javelin flying miles above me while I was working, soaring high, waiting impatiently for me to finish. But I never really did. There was always another problem to deal with, and my ridiculous high council made my job even harder than it already was. Some nights, I didn't even make it back to my chambers. All that aside, it was completely out of his character to do anything like this. Javelin lowered himself so that I could scale his left wing, and some of the High Council then emerged from the throne room to watch as I mounted my dragon. It was a process I'd mastered over the years, but it had gotten more difficult as Javelin grew bigger. I was slightly winded from the climb when I finally sat near the top of his back, where his neck began, and held onto 2 of the many rough spikes that covered his skin. I could feel his anger turn to joy when he reared back and stretched out his wings. They sounded like ship sails moving through a storm when he opened them up to touch the sky. His extended shadow cast an eerie darkness on the crumbled buildings that surrounded us. The sound of falling rubble resounded as Javelin moved his wings, forcing people to lose their balance in the relentless blasts of air. A lightning bolt of euphoria struck my nerves, and I held onto him tightly as we launched into the sky. Javelin was expertly cutting through the air, accelerating and ascending so rapidly that the wind was pummeling against my face markedly harder than usual. I tried to sit up straight in an attempt to slow him down, but he was so excited that he just kept zooming upward, forcing me to continue struggling with my balance. Still, I smiled through all the windy chaos. My kingdom saw Javelin as a symbol of war, but he was much more than that to me. At times, we even shared dreams. I looked for the Jewel of Emberlin before it was too far below to see properly. It was a marvelous expanse, glittering in gold, that was miles wide and protected behind an enchanted circular stone wall. Beyond the south side of this wall was the vast living forest, but beyond all other sides, the jewel was surrounded by Blackfire City. The city spread for miles too, until it gave way to the reddish sands that touched the horizon. For thousands of years, the entire region, the Castle City, has stood as Emberlin's capital. The jewel had 9 golden sky towers, just as the first crown consisted of 9 sharp crests. 8 towers were spaced equidistantly along the circular wall. They each held a chamber for one High Lord at the top. The 9th one was Emberlin's tower, and it stood out boldly in the middle, almost twice as big as all the others. The beauty of the architecture was quickly blemished when I noticed the massive crater that my dragon had left beside it. That used to be a courtyard, Jav. Thanks for that. The High Council will never let me hear the end of this. I grumbled and then rolled my eyes at the thought. This was exactly the reason why the Godwatch and the Council were on edge about Javelin hovering over the jewel to be near me. I was just happy that there were no meetings being held in the buildings he crushed. What an even bigger disaster that would have been. Another one of Javelin's shouts brought my thoughts back into the present. He'd locked his giant wings in place to glide on the currents. We were thousands of feet above the surface, which was peppered with reds and not the greens I'd grown up seeing on Earth. I had not yet gotten accustomed to the daunting presence of the 9 torches either. They were quite far away on the boundaries of my field of vision, but I could still see them all lined up in a row like vengeful gods waiting to strike. The torches had been dormant for eons, up until 5 years ago, when one started to release faint smoke and never stopped. There hadn't been an eruption yet, but its murmurs and plumes have been known to make the district quake. The wielders believed that an eruption of just one torch could set all of them off. That type of blast would destroy the kingdom and put the entirety of Xeraxia at risk. I knew my powers were strong as the new king, but I had not gotten close to testing their limits. Would I even be able to use my magic to stop an eruption like that if one did happen? The thought of trying to overpower even just one volcano made me shudder. Javelin's wings retracted, so I tightened my grip on him for what I knew was coming next. I braced through the hot, rushing air that beat against me when he nose-dived sharply toward Blackfire City. The buildings of black-red lava stone sliced through the air, reaching out to us as we dropped, and the brilliant diamond streets forced the sun's echoes across my eyes. The people grew ever larger as we dived, and I could see them occupied with their usual activities, socializing, selling their creations, using magical gateways, or riding fury hounds. There were entertainers and philosophers in the streets, too, coming into view as we honed in. In the nearby square, people gathered in one place or another to observe the flames of an Xeraxia. He was cloaked in nothing but traditional shimmering gold chains that draped off of every curve and edge of his body. As he moved and danced to the rhythm of the drums nearby, so did his heat. Alluring shapes and patterns of fire pulsed like living beings under the ember's control. The Xeraxia were visual artists, painters, who used the flame as their brush and the world as their canvas. They were musicians, dancers, storytellers, and keepers of myths and legends. Great skill and years of dedication were required to create the complex fire designs that they were known for. As such, they had a unique control over the flame that many embers envied. The multi-layered worlds that the Xeraxia created allowed me to understand such jealousy. For as overwhelming and powerful as my magic was, I couldn't sculpt fire into precise images like an Xeraxia could. Javelin tucked in even tighter, pulling the ground closer to us. The handsome Xeraxia took notice of this and fashioned his towering flames into the image of a dragon. The citizens around him all stared upward in awe, both at Javelin and at the marvel that he created. "You play too much. You'll scare them," I warned Javelin. I pulled on him hard, directing him to stop his descent. Sometimes I'd allow Javelin to satisfy his curious urge to observe people. He was as fascinated with them as they were with him. His blue gaze took time to inspect each one, and I felt the eyes of hundreds looking right back up at us. Some were laughing and cheering, others were scowling, but they had all paused to look nonetheless. "Look!" I heard a young girl's voice say over the sound of Jav's churning wings. I turned to get a clearer view. She was pointing with both hands outstretched, smiling wide. The red beads that held her puffy black pigtails together were knocking against themselves as she jumped. A spark of joy compelled me to respond to her until I saw her mothers. They did not like her excitement very much and quickly forced her hands down. The three women drilled their eyes into me, faces stern. I was sure they were among the many in the kingdom who wished they could bring my father back from the dead. Javelin almost gave me whiplash when he started convulsing. He writhed and squirmed in the air like he was being clawed at from the inside. I heard a collective gasp from the observers on the ground when he screamed fire and soared upward. My blood pumped hot with panic, and I toiled to maintain a hold. "Damn it," I thought as he darted in the direction of the 9 torches. Before this moment, I'd never been upset about Javelin's extreme aversion to saddle and armor. All I could do was grasp tighter and hope with all my heart that he wouldn't send me falling. Then, strangely, my magic flared, and I felt the flame awaken in us. My eyes poured out blue light, and Javelin's growls shook in his throat. "What the hell is happening? What is he doing?" I struggled to catch my breath on his contorting body. His wings were beating so ravenously that I thought he might hurt himself. "Javelin, what's wrong?" Was he seeing something that I couldn't? I looked around. As best I couldn't spot anything in the air or below. He raised his head and let out a scream that struck my brain. His wings pressed harder against the air. "Javelin!" My voice was barely a whimper in the noise. I pulled back on him to try and slow his movement. This worked, but only a little. I pulled back again, this time much harder, and he finally obeyed. He spewed out a blinding column of blue fire that extended for hundreds of feet above us. The sound of his explosive flames thrashed my skull, and it wailed throughout the landscape like a war horn. The flame then stabilized within us, and so did Javelin. He brought us to a fluctuating hover that eventually synced with our heartbeats. Up, down, up, down. He kept us levitating in place. "Times like these, I wish you could talk," I said to him. "Xander!" A familiar voice came from the glowing relay around my right wrist and startled me. Relays, or umaji, were thin gold bracelets created by House Equilhearth for magical communication. My eyes became alive with light as my flame gave the umaji the energy it needed to work. "Mother!" I responded while cooing Javelin. I was happy to hear her voice amid all the confusion. "Where are you? I didn't see you or Shangu at the council meeting. You all must have been running late." "Fortunately." "Yes, I heard what happened at the jewel," she said. I could sense her concern. "Is Javelin okay?" "I don't know yet," I sighed. "I'm flying with him now, and we're miles out. He freaked out up here, again." "Don't worry, we'll figure it out." She could hear the angst in my voice. "Just come down from there. I've arrived at what used to be the courtyard. and a lot of people are scared, to say the least. All right, let's get the rest of this meeting over with, I moaned. Yes, my mother chuckled. She knew how much I couldn't stand some of those insufferable politicians. Yes, let's. Way back in 2018, I put out the first book in my Xeraxia series called Xeraxia, Wrath of the God King. Now I'm so excited to let you all know that the sequel to that book, Xeraxia, The Vengeance of Coldwind, is out now. Anywhere you get your ebooks and audiobooks, you can find it there. I'm talking about Amazon, Audible, audiobooks.com, Google Play, like it's all there. Also, you can go to www.xeraxia.com to purchase it directly from my site. This sequel, The Vengeance of Coldwind, 220 something thousand words, which means 21 hours of audiobook listening time. So yeah, if you're looking for something Black and queer, action-packed with deep emotional moments and amazing magic battles, especially in book 2, check out my series, check out the first book, and make sure you get the second book because it's out now. I'm so excited.